Hey guys, welcome back to Chaos Core Tech. My name's Garrett, and today we're going to be making an Egyptian god of water. Now this video is actually a collaboration with Katelyn McCaigue. She is an artist here on YouTube, and this creature is actually an original creation of hers. So I'm going to be referring to her video a few times throughout this video, so make sure you go watch her part. There is a link down in the description, and you can see her process to create this character. So first things first, I'll talk about how I created this. To create the 3D model, I went into ZBrush, and I started using Z-spheres just to block out the basic shape, and that's one of the easiest ways to get things like limbs, a tail, and the long neck that this creature has. And then once the Z-spheres are in place, I can turn that into a solid object and start sculpting on it. So that's what I did, and from there it was just a process of going around, adding the details where possible, and making sure all of the shapes were the way that I wanted them. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, you likely know that my goal with these is to improve my 3D modeling skills. And this one definitely made me push myself a little bit. There were quite a few techniques that I had never attempted here, specifically fur and some of the posing techniques I had never done. And just the model itself was a little bit more difficult because I'd never done any sort of like creatures before, so that was new territory for me. And the head shape was particularly difficult for me, just because I knew I needed to get it to look exactly like the picture. And in the end, I think I got there, but it was definitely a lot of little tweaking and moving around little areas just to get the shape perfectly how I wanted it. So after I got the tail posed, I went around and masked off the areas where the fur needs to be. And then I just basically extracted that so it was its own object, so I could kind of push it around and really get the texture in there that I wanted. And like I said before, I've never really done fur before. I've done a little bit of hair, but I would say that's definitely a weak spot for me. So it's good to get practice in and sort of mess with techniques in order to get things to look a little bit more fur-like. And it is definitely a unique struggle since I will be 3D printing this. You know, 3D printers are pretty limited on how small the details can be, you know, obviously depending on how big you print it. But a lot of the little things like the texture in the fur won't come out exactly the same when you print it. And you also have to keep in mind that you'll have to deal with layer lines. So normally you sand layer lines away, but if something's textured like fur, you can't really do that because you would sand away the texture on the fur as well. Luckily, we had a solution for that, and I will talk about that in just a second. And another quick thing to note is there were a few small details, particularly the tongue was a difficult area because it's very thin, it's an extremely small detail, and it kind of just hangs out over the front of the model. So of course, to print that tongue, it would need supports to hold it up, and something that tiny generally does not stick to supports well, and I found that was the case here. As you'll see when Chelsea starts painting it, it actually doesn't have a tongue on there, so I had to print the tongue separately and then glue it. And if you look closely, the tongue didn't come out extremely well, and that's just due to how tiny the piece was and not being able to print a detail quite that tiny. It really makes me wish we had access to a good SLA printer, because then it would have handled this no problem, and the layer lines wouldn't have even been an issue, and it would have been able to capture some of the small details quite a bit better. So after the model was done and fully posed, I prepped it for printing and printed it out on my Prusa i3 Mark IIs. I printed it at a 0.1mm layer height just to try and squeeze out as much detail as I could here. I think that worked pretty well, especially considering our secret weapon here, because we actually just got sent a polisher. So we printed this in the Polysmooth PLA. So after it was done printing, we put it in the polisher for about 30 minutes, and I was an idiot and didn't think to actually record this thing being polished. I think it was one of those moments where I just get distracted by shiny things. So forgive me for not having footage to show of the polisher here. I will be showing that in upcoming videos for sure. And the polisher did an amazing job. Basically what it does is uses rubbing alcohol to sort of smooth the outside of the print. And it doesn't fix all of the issues, but it definitely gets rid of most of the layer lines, and that's a huge deal because it removes a lot of the need for sanding. And like I mentioned earlier with the fur, that's just something you couldn't sand because you would remove the detail from the fur, and the polisher was able to remove a lot of those layer lines while still keeping the texture of the fur. So it definitely came in super handy for this project. Then after it was done in the polisher and fully dried, I handed it off to Chelsea for post-processing. She sanded it just a little bit, most notably in the areas where the support were, like underneath the belly. And then there were a few areas, mostly around the tail, that didn't print perfectly, so she went over that with some putty and smoothed it out and fixed the error. Then after that, she hit it with a coat of filler primer and went to work painting it. Now she whipped up her normal magic by using some acrylic paints and paintbrushes, and of course an extremely steady hand. And I'm always amazed when I watch her do these things because it seems so natural for her. But I have tried painting things in the past, and I'm just not good with it. I'm not even good at mixing the colors and stuff like that. And she just flawlessly handles some of the most difficult things, and some of those things you don't even think about until you're in there doing it. Like on this model, for example, when she started painting the parts of the body that don't have fur on them, it's a very dark color, and so she went around with that, and she kind of painted across onto some of the lighter details that are in those areas. They're very small details, and that type of thing just happens when you're painting. But for someone like me, I would have just tried to go in with the colors for those details and just paint over it. But she, being experienced, knows this. She actually went back over it with white to help cover up the black color, because she knows using light colors to paint over dark colors just does not work very well, and a lot of times the dark colors will show through the light colors. And of course she always puts multiple coats on everything just to make sure that the coats are even and you can't see any brush strokes. You know, there's just a lot of attention to detail that goes into these models that I think is very easy to overlook if you don't know a lot of what goes into the painting process and just how difficult it can actually be. Because when I paint these types of things, you can see brush strokes, the colors are always off. I always have really messy lines where two different colors meet, and she just handles these things flawlessly. So I just wanted to draw a little bit of attention to that and give her the props she deserves for painting these models so well. Then once she was done applying all of the colors and everything had dried, she hit it with a little bit of a glossy clear coat, and that just gives it a little bit of a shine and makes it look a little bit more professional, and at the same time it'll help protect the paint underneath. Then after that dried, we were left with the finished piece. Alright guys, well there you have it. This is the Komodo Dragon Wolf Monster Mash that Katelyn McCaigue came up with. And this was a really fun project to work on. I've never really collaborated with someone in this fashion before, so I thought it was really fun and an interesting process. And it was pretty interesting in watching her video and her talking about the decisions she made while designing this character. There was definitely some parallel thinking, or maybe even some of the decisions that she made while designing this character were apparent to me while 3D modeling it, that she didn't even have to expressly tell me those things. One thing in particular that caught my attention that was pretty cool was when she was talking about these waves and the water around it, she was talking about imagining a sphere in the middle around which the water comes up, and that's exactly what I was thinking when I created it. Obviously I had her picture to go on, but when I saw that I'm just like, oh yeah, it's coming up like a sphere, and I actually used a 3D sphere and hollowed it out and then created the waves from that. So it's just funny how the thought processes line up there. And then there's one other thing that I wanted to touch on quickly, and that is the whole the creation aspect of this character, this monster mash that she created. As you know, on this channel I talk about improving my 3D modeling skills a lot, and that's definitely been my focus up to this point. But now what I'm wanting to do is create some of my own original characters, and that's actually what I've been trying to do over on my Twitch streams, and just have fun with the audience while we're doing it. But it's people like Katelyn that are doing this type of thing all the time that I aspire to be able to do as well, to come up with a really, really cool character and then be able to bring that to life with 3D printing. So I appreciate her wanting to team up on this and letting me take a crack at creating this awesome character that she designed. So once again, there's a link down in the description to her video for this if you have not watched it yet. I will also put it in the end card at the end of this video. And make sure you subscribe to her channel as well, because she does these Monster Mash things quite often. They're always really cool, and she does a lot of interesting art challenges. Like she just got done with an ABC challenge. And if you wonder what that is, just look at her channel, it'll become pretty apparent. And there's just lots of fun creative things like that. So make sure you go check her out. Alright guys, well thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and until next time, keep creating.